Namaste, friends. We're so happy to be able to participate with you. We wish we were there live, but this is as much as God is allowing us right now. But at least, dear friends that you are, we're able to be with you in this way. I want to talk a little bit about Yogananda's mission, and this being the 100th anniversary of his coming to America, and all of the enormous changes, the world evolving events that have happened, many of them related to his coming to the West in 1920. It was September 1920 that he arrived in America, having come from on the first ship, the city of Sparta, that left India after the ending of the First World War. So as soon as it was possible, he came. Like our times that we're in now, he had just gone through a pandemic, a worldwide pandemic, with the Spanish flu, as it was called, that killed millions in India and around the world. In fact, it took more lives than this current COVID virus has done. I don't want to dwell on that, obviously. I just want to say that he came in times that we can relate to. He came in tumultuous times. But his mission did not start with the coming to the West. It really started with the coming of Dwapara Yuga. So a couple of 100 years earlier, before he came to the West, Dwapara Yuga came into its, one might say, its real beginnings. And at that time, the world needed something new, something better than what had been the prevailing practices and ideas and ways of worshiping during Kali Yuga. And so, symbolically, Babaji and Jesus, who Yogananda said are responsible for the spiritual evolution of this planet, Babaji for the East, Jesus for the West, working together, they're responsible for the evolution of the planet in a spiritual sense. And since we know as devotees that spirit precedes the physical reality, one could say their responsibility, their job, is the welfare of the planet. So knowing that this change of ages was coming, symbolically, they met together in the Himalayas to talk about how the time had come for East and West to begin to merge, to bring their particular strengths into, one might call it, a marriage that would help the whole world. The West had evolved, in a sense, more practically, with better materialistic means of production and business skills and practical ways of building all kinds of things, while the East, especially India, exemplified the spiritual connection of mankind with God, and specifically the particular kind of connection that was going to be needed during Dwapara Yuga. And so the coming together of Babaji and Jesus, long before, a century or more before Yogananda's birth even, they're coming together in order to set in movement this world-changing event that was going to help merge these two great cultures, America and India. America, really being the first Dwapara Yuga country, was born 1776, right at the beginning of Dwapara Yuga, and India being the most ancient of all the cultures that are continuing their existence. And as I said, one specializing in the material world, the other in the spiritual world. The time came for these two great nations to come together. And so the way that that was done was to send one of the representatives, a self-realized master who knew intimately all of the spiritual realizations and practical spiritual techniques needed during this age, to send that representative from India to America to bring that mindset, that culture, that understanding into this new Dwapara Yuga country. And so we, of course, personalize it because we're disciples of Yogananda. We love Yogananda. We have followed his teachings. They have informed our lives. So, of course, we think of it as, well, Yogananda did this. He did, but he was the instrument of the divine to do it. And so, acting as an instrument of the divine, 100 years ago, he brought this energy from India to America. And that represented the coming together of East and West, of spirituality and materialism. And then his mission was to take that spirituality and to infuse it into the cultural mind stream of America. And my goodness, what a job he did. When you read a little bit about his life, we get, and you can get it also, a daily, it's a day in the life of Yogananda. And it's on the internet, sent out by Ananda. And it shows what Yogananda was doing on this day in history. Then it might be 1924, it might be 1937, 36, whatever. But on this day, what he was doing and where he was. Many of the events that come are, he came to Minneapolis on this day, and he started a 6-week series of courses. He met with this society and that society. He was met by the founder of the local art museum, and so on. His active life was incredibly active. He was churning, as he used this term, he was churning the ether with his energy, putting out this enormous magnetism to draw, as he saw in his vision, the hungry, waiting souls in America who wanted this teaching. He was asked in an interview, do you have to work hard to draw disciples? Did you have to work hard? This was later on in his life. He gave a very interesting answer. He says, does the magnet have to work hard to draw the iron filings? He said, no, it's just a part of the way things are. So he was working primarily with his magnetism. But he went on to say in this answer, but the magnet has to be close enough to the iron filings for them to be drawn. And so he had, if he had remained in India, these teachings wouldn't have come to this shore of America, which is where we're speaking from. And it wouldn't have changed. It wouldn't have started this like yeast in bread. It wouldn't have started that change that has resulted in a very, very expansive and new way of working in the world. So in his mission, he's had about 8 or 10 years where he traveled very extensively. He basically went to every major city in America. And he gave not just a talk here and a talk there, but he would give free lectures. He would talk on multiple topics, very practical, how to succeed in the business world, how to have vibrant health, how to attract your ideal life companion. Many, many, many practical topics, because he knew that's what was going to attract the enthusiasm of the American audiences. But he didn't leave it there. That was, one might say, his fishing lures. They were practical, they were good, but nonetheless, it wasn't what he really came to do. Then he would follow up those free lectures with courses essentially like what we have all received, and we all still teach now 100 years later. Courses in how to meditate, these particular teachings, the techniques that we still practice. He would give these courses, and then he would return the next year to the same city. It might be Chicago, it might be Minneapolis, it might be Philadelphia, San Francisco, Washington, Los Angeles, all over this country. He would return and he would give more advanced classes as well as continuing this mission. So for the first 10 years or so that he was here, he had this tremendous output, as I say, churning the ether with his energy, magnetizing the consciousness of this country. Then after he had done that, he said, now the time for all of that outreach has stopped, because he realized that while it spread these teachings broadly, it didn't allow them to go deep, because he was mainly talking to people who were coming somewhat out of curiosity, with some desire for self-improvement, but very few of them really integrated these teachings as a lifelong practice. So after 10 years or so, he said, now is the time that I settle. And he settled in Los Angeles, and he began to work with the deeper disciples, those who were going to be, one might say, his army or his team to continue to spread these teachings to the world. And he worked, he still traveled, but now a phase in his life came where he was primarily writing and primarily working with the close disciples who were there at Mount Washington and who were helping in publishing a magazine that spread these teachings, lessons that people could take and learn at home and work with that, the founding of meditation groups. All of that work, deeper work one might say, began as a part, now more of a central part of his mission, whereas the lecturing before had been the central part. It took kind of a secondary part, and what had been secondary, his writing and his publishing, had been a secondary part because he didn't have time during that those road trips to do as much as he would like. Now he began his great works, his interpretations of the Bhagavad Gita, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, and most especially, the autobiography of a yogi. That book, published in 1946, which was 26 years after Yogananda came, that book has reached now millions, perhaps tens of millions of people. It is still, in some places, the most popular spiritual autobiography on the bestseller list. And it has had an enormous impact. It has drawn, his lectures drew hundreds of thousands of people. That book has drawn millions of people. You probably have read the book. It's very possible that, like me, that book was what introduced you to these teachings. That book changed my life. It may have changed your life. It has certainly changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people. And so that continuing offering of light, offering of the teachings, because that book is like a picture window that you look through and you see a vista that for me I didn't even know existed. Not a physical vista, a vista of consciousness, samadhi, the cosmic consciousness, the interaction between spirit and energy and physical reality, the law of miracles, how to relate to a guru. It covers chapter after chapter after chapter, covers a new terrain that for me, when I read it, it was absolutely thrilling to read that book. And as I said, it changed my life. Well, it also changed the life of a very important American, Swami Kriyananda. At the time, he was a college dropout, you might say. He was brilliant, but college didn't hold enough of an interest for him, and he was struggling for what to do with his life. I'm not going to talk much about that because Davey's going to talk about his life. But I want to say that one of the things that happened as a result of the autobiography is that Swami Kriyananda read that book and traveled across the country from New York to Los Angeles and immediately became the disciple and a monk in the order with Yogananda. Swami Kriyananda, of course, has gone on to change all of our lives. But as I say, I'm going to let Davy cover that subject. Coming back and kind of just putting a cap on it, Yogananda in his mission did many things. One was to introduce the teachings of India into America, the techniques, and most especially the science of Kriya Yoga and the meditation techniques that lead to being able to actually use Kriya Yoga as part of your spiritual life. That now has been introduced into the world and spread all around the globe. He brought other things too. He brought a merging of East and West, the appreciation of Americans of India, and consequently the appreciation of Indians of America. And those two, living in India, how much influence the practical aspects of America, business aspects and companies and corporations and internet and software companies and on and on and on, how much influence that has had on modern day life. Well, Indian spirituality has had as much of an influence in the West as American technology has had in the East. So Yogananda brought together the joining of East and West. He brought to the world the understanding and appreciation that all deep spiritual paths lead to the same goal. That we shouldn't be fighting Christians and Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists shouldn't be fighting with each other. We should be appreciating each other because we're all traveling by slightly different paths to the same goal. He had what he called the Church of All Religions. That's what he named his temple in Los Angeles, to show that. He also showed the underlying unity of the search for truth through science and through spirituality. That these two aren't opposed to each other, that they should be complementary ways of searching for the truth. In all ways, he showed a world vision that we so desperately need right now. A world vision of mutual appreciation and support and merging, and most of all, of seeing everything and everyone as God's drama, and every one as a valuable, needed part of the whole picture of God's creation. And in that vision of the search for God, the knowledge that God has created this world, has become this world, and everyone we look at, whether our friend or supposed enemy, everyone is just another manifestation of God, that we are all brothers and sisters, and it does not matter whether you were born Hindu or Christian, whether you were born in India or America, we are all one great family. And Yogananda has brought that understanding, and it is the understanding that is needed during Dwapara Yuga, and especially needed during these turbulent times that we find ourselves in. What a great, great blessing it has been to our lives, to my life, and to the world that Yogananda was able to carry out his mission from the masters in such a gloriously successful way. And what a great blessing that he magnetized so beautifully and powerfully his great disciple, Swami Kriyananda, who has been the key to my life and to the lives of so many others who are now part of Ananda. So God bless you during this celebration of Yogananda's 100 years of changing the world. God bless you. Namaste.